The OPZ has some very decent sounds, but its secret weapon is actually the amazing inbuilt multi-channel sequencer. So I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of my top 3 tips on how to utilize that power together with Ableton Live to make a pattern like this sound like this. You probably already know that this synth is an all-in-one ultra-portable solution that makes it easy to compose and perform tracks using only this device and nothing else. Personally, I'm a huge fan of that approach and have done a series of performances and in-depth tutorials including free samples and synth presets for the OPZ, so maybe consider subscribing if you want to see those, but for now in this video I'm going to focus on showing you how to connect your OPZ to your computer as a way to explore more professional production techniques. So method 1 is the fastest way, which is to record existing songs or beats that you've already written on the OPZ and you want to bring over into Ableton. This sounds extremely obvious, and while yes, you can send the actual audio channel with audio in from USB over from DZ, that's not what I'm talking about. For this and all 3 tips, I'm going to suggest that instead of audio, let's go over to Ableton Live. We want to build a much more flexible workflow and create 8 MIDI channels. For beginners, creating a MIDI channel, one of these columns, is as simple as going create, insert MIDI track. And now you'll have a fresh MIDI track here. I've already prepared some here, you can see, and chosen the simplest approach of naming and matching these MIDI channels with each of the corresponding tracks. So that would be the kick, the snare, percussion or hats, the samples, the bass, lead, arp, chord. So I've named those there. I've just called the arp and chord polysynths for my own reference because I pulled them from something else, but you can organize them whatever way you want, whatever floats your boat. For each of them I've set up, we're going to go with this fresh MIDI channel just so you can see how it is from the start. I've got the MIDI from, you can select the OPZ. All-ins is fine if you don't have other devices, but let's just reduce the possible things to go wrong. And instead of all channels, we want to set a specific channel, which is channel 1 for kick, channel 2 for snare, etc, etc. Now for the first 4, for the sample tracks, I'd grab a drum rack and just drop it onto that MIDI channel. We can leave this blank for now, but for the other 4, if we get rid of that drum rack, I'll show you what to do on the other 4. What you want to do for those is go to Instruments and then just grab, here we've got Analog Saw Bass. For each of those channels, what you want to do as well is record enable them, and then make sure in the Ableton Live preferences, in the link and MIDI, that for the input and the Z you have track and remote on. This is going to come in use later. Now if I have that MIDI input on and record, we can see this yellow line coming in when I hit a kick sample, which means that I have MIDI input coming in, which is good, so we're on track. By the way, once this is all set up in Ableton with your OPZ, I highly advise you click Save As and keep this project in a template form in case you want to go back or produce more music. I know it's boring, but if you're going through all this effort in future and you want to use the same idea, you don't want to repeat this entire process. Also, don't forget to go up and set the BPM here to match your Ableton project and your OPZ project if you've already written something and you want tempo synced effects. Now the last thing before we can get some nice sounds happening with our pre-written song on the OPZ is we want to go to the drums and let's just search kick. And we've got a bunch of samples here. What we can do is we can drag and drop them into the drum rack, but I've already got some bits and pieces here that I've set up. Ideally, you want to set them all as kicks. That's going to make your life a lot easier. So now we're ready. We can close that side panel And let's just hit play. Already we have something great going, and we can use the mutes. We can do all sorts of things, and that's going to stop the MIDI messages coming out. Let's just hit stop. Honestly, to me, this comparison is already night and day. I think compared to the sounds you get in the internal OPZ, it's not really a fair comparison. So Ableton is coming out much better. And we have a beat that we've made on the train or the bus or at the park or something with just this device, and we can bring it into this template and hit play, and we'll get something interesting straight away with a lot of different elements. It's better yet, easy to go back and manipulate individual notes after the fact. So let's hit record and go over, we're hitting tab, go over into this timeline view. You can see those notes coming in there. If I change my mind, or I think that it would be cool, I can go in and I can manipulate these notes here and already we have a totally new idea. I think that that's just a fast way to work and take something you've already written, manipulate it. In addition to the MIDI notes, almost every dial and button in Ableton can actually be mapped to MIDI CC messages like these rotaries here. And this is especially nice for writing songs from scratch directly into Ableton with this as a desk controller. So what we want to do is, I know what I want to map already, so let's go to those hats, that track, and then in Ableton I'm going to hit MIDI in this corner, and basically any parameter here can be mapped. So if I go to the A send on the hats, there's this little number because I've already mapped it, but we're going to map it from scratch now. Now that's activated, I'm just going to touch that dial, and you see when we move this up and down, it moves with it. So what we can even do is actually sequence those movements or keyframe them in different patterns. So I've got two different ones here. In the first one, I can turn the reverb all the way down. In the second one, just jump back and forth between that. If we want to go over to like the chord track, for example, we can get really detailed in Ableton and see what else we can set. So let's go into that chord polysynth. It looks a bit complicated if you're not familiar with Ableton, but it's really very okay. We're going to hit MIDI, and then just on the cutoff on the synth, I've already mapped it as well, but we can map this rotary encoder, hit MIDI again. So now when we move it, we see it go up and down. So if I play a chord, sounds huge. It's so much more fun, and we can program that, play it live, do a lot of things. The more effects that you can enable, filter cutoffs, elements, things like that, if you really know this device, the more that you can do in Ableton with the full power of every single effect engine while only touching this device. For me, that's so much better because I get sick of looking at the screen all day and I feel less inspired, whereas I'm sitting with this. I really love this synth. If you follow the channel, you know that. So this is just another way to use it. Now, tip number 3 that I want to give is how to generate variations. This can be rhythmic or melodic. This can be in the timeline view or in the session view, however you want to work with Ableton. If you already have a workflow, it's quite flexible to use this technique if you have an OPZ. But basically, the master effects channel and the step components as well, they have huge opportunities for new ideas in sequencing, and you can take one pattern, just one, and record a bunch of variations until you hear something you like. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So if we go to pattern, I think this is a melodic one here. So that's something I've already prepared. Now we're recording. If we go to that effects channel, we can hold this. Okay, so that was pretty interesting. Nothing too crazy, but let's just hold it for a while. Okay, that second melodic half is kind of garbage, but some interesting stuff there. So let's hit stop and stop here. If we just isolate that polysynth by going solo, you probably know that if you used Ableton before, we can play these different parts. Damn, some of these are actually sounding pretty cool. So I think this is kind of interesting. I think some of these are actually pretty cool and fun, and it feels a little bit like cheating. This random engine is taking this one progression that I made, barely call it a progression, it's just a little chordal riff, but for free we're getting new ideas. It's giving life to an existing song. We can use it to build a B section to have a little alternation and other patterns, or just have fun, muck around with it. For ambient music, this is absolutely crazy. This is one of the most powerful things, and I have a tutorial specifically on that. But anyway, regardless, I hope that this was understandable in some way for you. Please at least consider subscribing if you're new and this helped, because this channel just hit 1,000 subscribers, which I don't like to focus on too much, but I want to say thank you to everyone who's watching. It's really enjoyable to be part of a community that values creativity, loves making music, especially really enjoys their synth or just music in general. But I hope that these ideas spark some new concepts for you, and yeah, maybe you can get a massive boost out of your existing gear. So I just want to say thanks for your time, and see you in the next one.